All right, let's bring in Senior Vice President of NCAA Men's Basketball, Dan Gavitt. First and foremost, Dan, I have to thank you for joining us here on HQ. I know you have a lot on your plate, not a lot of sleep right now, so thank you for joining us.
A pleasure to be with you, Amanda.
All right, so a couple of new developments that are going on today, possibilities we are hearing. The first one I want to start with is the potential of a bracket still coming out, the full 68 teams. Is this something you guys are looking into?
Well, not currently at the moment, Amanda, but you know, we are hearing, understandably so, I think, from coaches and on behalf of their student athletes that you know, there's value in their minds to know definitively whether they were an NCAA tournament team or not. We did talk about that and consider it with the committee when they were here in New York City. And a couple of realities. One is that once this decision was made, they would, as being athletic directors and commissioners, had responsibilities to get back to deal with the coronavirus situation in their own organizations. And two is we had, you know, all sorts of unfinished tournaments. I think there were 18 unfinished tournaments and thus 8 Qs, automatic qualifiers that were not determined. So getting to a full process where we have those AQs determined and thus get to the at-larges presents kind of a speculative problem for the committee. Usually their work doesn't involve any kind of speculation at all. They know exactly which teams have completed their season and what their results are. So there are considerations to that. Conferences have to determine how their automatic qualifiers would be determined if their tournaments didn't finish. So it's something that we're still thinking about a little bit, but you know, we need to kind of re-engage the committee and see where that could go. At this point, there's not...
The tournament yourself, I mean, the first decision that came down was no fans were allowed. Ultimately, we got the cancellation. But in that time period, what other options were you guys looking at regarding the tournament? We've heard things about possibly a 16-team tournament, smaller venues. What were some of those options you guys considered?
Yeah, good question. You know, the whole week evolved so quickly and dramatically. All the changes going from, you know, using all 15 sites with fans to then no fans, and then ultimately, obviously, no tournament at all. So we did have contingency planning going on for the last couple of weeks, frankly, that ramped up significantly day by day this week. We did put in place some contingencies confidentially to have backups for first four, backup first and second rounds, as well as backup for regionals. We'd identified Kansas City as a first four backup site, as well as a first and second round backup site. Had one of those sites not been able to be used. We also identified Lucas Oil Stadium in Indianapolis as a first and second round backup site the week before the planned regionals there if needed. And then Houston would have been a site we would have considered moving a regional to and just having a double regional there in order to just get the tournament played, given the unusual nature of the things changing on an hour-to-hour basis. We also, after the NBA's decision to suspend the remainder of their season late Wednesday night, developed an idea to modify the format, shrink it down significantly to just 16 teams in the hopes of being able to play the tournament in a much more compressed time period in just a week and determine a national champion among 16 at-large selections in one site. For both the men's and women's tournaments if necessitated. But we really didn't get a whole lot of considerations of that last one because by the time we started to spend more time on that possibility, we were moving towards cancellation of the tournament from the NCAA Board of Governors' decision.
Well, and I know things were moving so quickly here, and as fans, you know, everybody wanted to know what's going to happen. If you could, though, kind of take us behind the scenes and some of the decision-making that ultimately led to the cancellation of this, because, you know, we weren't there, and I was reading that you guys had an advisory panel with epidemiologists, infectious disease experts. You were in contact with the CDC in Atlanta, and a lot of the general public didn't know that was going on behind the scenes. So kind of paint us a picture of what was going on.
You're exactly right. We had an outstanding team of experts in those areas of medical fields, epidemiology, infectious diseases, safe sport, that were working with us from early March, all the way back to March 3rd. That advisory panel was established and working with on a day-to-day basis. They were meeting independently and then giving us guidance to the championship staff and committees, as to what we should or shouldn't be doing. First, safe practices, best practices, and then blessing moving forward with having fans in the stadium. And then ultimately that all changed within about 48 hours early this week, where after getting data they had reviewed from China and South Korea and Italy and different strategies that were used there to contain the virus, that they changed their thinking in about a 48-hour time period based on empirical data and projections that, oh boy, we really can't be having fans at these events, which is obviously what led to other organizations like the NBA, NHL, and Disney World and everything else, kind of changing those large-scale gatherings that were permissible even earlier this week. So we had great medical guidance through this whole thing, relied on that because ultimately the health and safety and well-being of student athletes, coaches, fans was the most important thing. It always has been, and so that was the biggest priority all week, and which led to the unfortunate decision to cancel the.
Dan, let's move on to some of the students, because that was obviously one of the hardest parts about all of this, is watching those players not get to play in this tournament, specifically the seniors. So I want to get all the facts from you, what's going on, what could happen, because we heard from the NCAA, I believe today, that you guys are granting a year of relief for spring student athletes, specifically those seniors, which in my mind means another year of eligibility. So please correct me if I'm wrong. And then I want to know, what about the winter sport athletes, which does, of course, include basketball?
Sure. Well, that's really out of my area of responsibility and expertise. So that gets into our kind of eligibility area. I'm on championships, but it is my understanding that they have granted opportunity for spring sports student athletes who are otherwise going to miss their entire season of championship. I don't think they've weighed in yet on winter student athletes and additional year of eligibility. It's a little more complicated because, in the winter sports, nearly all of their seasons were completed, despite except for the conference championships in some cases and the NCAA tournament. So I don't know. The committee, the membership will make that determination, I'm sure, in the coming days and weeks. And hopefully I'll have a chance to weigh in because I'll have an opinion on it as it relates to basketball for sure. And, it's heartbreaking. Absolutely heartbreaking for all those basketball players, men, women, as well as other student athletes and other winter sports and spring sports, especially the seniors, but even the underclassmen who have a team together that was good enough to get into the tournament, have that experience, or indeed good enough to compete legitimately for a national championship.
Dan, you said it's out of your area of expertise, kind of making these decisions. So within the NCAA, who is in charge of making those decisions over the next couple of days? How does that process work?
Well, it's actually membership that will make those decisions. We have committees of folks that are faculty, athletic reps, and athletic directors, and senior administrators. So right off our campuses and conference offices that will weigh in on things like that. And they work together with the staff that Stan Wilcox oversees, our Executive Vice President of Regulatory Affairs, and they'll collaborate with the campus members to make those determinations.
Dan, I know whether it's in the media or fans, obviously there's been so many questions coming out of all of this, but just from your side, maybe some questions we're not answering, or just anything that you or the NCAA wants the general public to know. From a very personal standpoint, Amanda, this was the worst professional life of my 30 years in this business. And I know that even how I feel pales in comparison to the way student athletes feel, who work so hard to get to this point to be able to play in these tournaments. And the committee members, to a person, all felt the same way. Their athletic directors and commissioners that worked their butts off from early November through this week to make sure to be prepared to get the field selected right, seated right, bracketed right, and to provide this amazing experience that we've been able to do for 81 straight years. And the emptiness and numbness that we all feel about the fact that it's not going to happen is, as you said at the top, is going to mean a real tough march for all of us, and very, very saddened for the student athletes, empathetic, and it's a time, I think, when we all realize that as much as we love this game, there are things that are bigger and more important than it, and health and the well-being of people that play college sports and that live in our country are the utmost priority at this point. All right.